Hello, listeners. It's Mallory Wilsey, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to take just a moment to tell you about another show on Enrollify that I know you'll love. Breaking Silos aims to showcase the remarkable work of marketing professionals and their non marketing colleagues from different departments across campus who come together to achieve common goals, implement new initiatives, enhance the student experience, and foster better collaboration among teams. Hosted by Shane Biglini, who leads marketing at Muhlenberg College, each episode of Breaking Silos will feature a marketer and their non marketing colleague to talk about that partnership. This unique format will inspire marketers to try new things and connect with colleagues in new ways, while also allowing non marketing professionals an inside look at some of the most collaborative projects in higher ed marketing. New episodes drop every other Wednesday, and you can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Breaking Silos wherever you get your podcasts.
Ensuring that faculty and staff are productive can be difficult for an institutional president, especially if they're leading a large institution. But even for a small institution, a president is doing their part to guide efforts to do so many things: ensure student satisfaction, raise money, keep facilities together, work with the local business community, work with elected officials, etc., 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 etc. So, how did one of the most respected and recognized presidents in the country work with his faculty and staff? Well, Walter Kimbrough visited I Want to Work There to talk about how he worked to create a positive talent experience during his presidencies. In this episode, you're going to learn three things. One, you're going to hear about the importance of establishing a culture from the president's seat. Two, learn what it means to communicate honestly with faculty and staff. And three, if you're an aspiring president, you're going to get a little advice. So, about my friend Walter Kimbrough, he's a former president of Philander Smith College, now Philander Smith University, where he got the moniker Hip Hop Prez. He was also the president of Dillard University for 10 years, where he helped grow the endowment by 115%. He also led the effort for alumni giving to increase from 4% to 23%. Dillard also, under his leadership, recorded its largest single alumni gift of $1 million and its largest single private donation of $5 million gift from Mackenzie Scott. He's now the president in residence with Rutgers University's Center for MSIs. And Walter earned his PhD in higher education from Georgia State University, his master's from Miami University of Ohio, and his bachelor's degree from the University of Georgia. You can read more about Walter Kimbrough in the show notes. But for now, let's get into I Want to Work There. Welcome to I Want to Work There, a podcast that helps colleges and universities boost their brands as employers of choice. I'm your host, Eddie Francis, brand strategy consultant for Edify Ventures. Join me every other week for discussions with some of the best minds in talent recruitment and retention, human resources, and marketing and communications inside and outside of higher education. I Want to Work There is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals just like you grow, and explore our other shows at enrollify.org, or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Joining us is Dr. Walter Kimbrough, Brother Kimbrough, President Kimbrough, Hip Hop Prez. How you doing, man? Great to have you on the podcast.
I'm doing good, thank you.
I really wanted to get you on I Want to Work There because I need to say this to you publicly. I truly enjoyed working under you at Dillard. There were a lot of times when you really, I think, went out of your way to make sure that the employees understood that they were valued. Little things you did, like extra days before the holiday break, those 2 extra days made a big difference, And the fact that you knew everybody's name, just about so many names for faculty and staff. And I thought it was really important to have somebody like you on the podcast to really talk about what it is that drove you. So let's start with this. You have worked at different types of institutions. You've worked at predominantly white institutions. You've been president at HBCUs, and you've worked at HBCUs. So when it comes to work culture overall, and I know every institution is different regardless. What stood out to you about the work cultures of the different types of colleges and universities that you've worked at?
Yeah, I mean, so there are a lot of differences. I mean, I started at Emory. That was my first full time job, and of course, Emory's in Atlanta. They got Coca Cola money, so there is a level of not arrogance. It's like there is a level of we're the best. It's like I used to go to lunch all the time with the woman who was over international students, and then in Greek life was in residential services, and so the woman who was director of she did the facilities team plus all the housekeeping and interior design. So it wasn't just like she was over facilities. She was housekeeping, interior design, that kind of specialty. And so like I got some award as like AFA New Professional of the Year. And I was excited. She was like, baby, we all superstars here. This is the person who's it was like so she's a black woman, went to Spelman, but that was sort of like that was Emory. She was like, we expect. I mean, we don't expect anything less. We all superstars. So it was like a level of expectation, that we all are great.
They have this institutional self-assuredness, it sounds like.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's just like I said, all across the institution. That was like everybody was expected to be great, and you just sort of felt that even though like I mean people were cool and you had real good people, and there's a friend of mine who started working there 30 years ago who still works there, so all that is really good. Then being at Georgia State during the time, it's urban commuter moving into more residential, so it was an institution trying to find this place, and so it's really sort of disconnected, so it didn't have a culture really, you know what I'm saying. They're really trying to build, like, to say what's the culture there. Old Dominion, also urban commuter, trying to build an identity. The president started, the idea I got for doing lecture series actually came from Old Dominion because the president there was like, nobody knows anything about us. And he was doing the controversial things like Dr. Ruth spoke there one year, Phyllis Schlafly, Al Sharpton. I remember all that. Um, so they were trying to figure out like, how do we create an environment in the state where you have William and Mary and UVA, who is ODU? So that was part of it. Albany State, Southwest Georgia. You had a lot of characters in Albany, Georgia. So that campus was full of like these vibrant. I mean, it could have been a television show. It was like reality TV before there was reality TV. That was Albany State. It was just that kind of. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, you had messy stuff going on too, but it was fun. So they had that kind of environment. I'm trying to think how I would describe Philander Smith because it was a place that I think people realized was in a lot of trouble. And so I was really trying to figure out like how do we survive and do some things differently. So they had to go along for a ride to say, if you look historically, this is who we are. How do we get back to that? And I think once people saw it happening, they started to get a little more confidence to say, okay, but it was tough in the beginning because, I'm coming in as a new guy bringing all the bad news and say, yeah, we got this audit finding this audit and the federal government's coming. So nobody wanted to hear all that. So that was really tough. Dillard, for me, I always said Dillard, and I think to a degree still does have an inferiority complex. And by that, I mean, people were too deferential to Xavier and it pissed me off. I was like, Xavier's a great institution. I love Dr. Francis. I think he's one of the greatest college presidents ever. I'm like, but y'all got a lot of good stuff here and a lot of good people, and y'all always too deferential to Xavier. I'm just like, no. So that was the thing that brought. So my goal was to try to get us to have a little bit more moxie, if you will, to be like, okay, y'all good, but we good too.
Like in a couple of those cases, like Philander and Dillard, when it came to the work cultures, it sounded like you had a lot of massaging to do. Like you had to come in and tell folks, we got this, but we have to be
Right.
confident in ourselves that we can get through whatever happens.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, Philander was, in an existential crisis. So that was a challenge for them. Dillard wasn't like that. I mean, coming back after Katrina and things are coming back together and, finishing the campus, rebuilding all of that. It was just in terms of, for me, realizing after meeting with so many people, like my first 6 months, I met with 200 people individually. I I was like, man, there's some really talented people here. I mean, I was just very impressed with people.
I want to come back to that about instilling a sense of confidence in folks because I remember the reception I got when it was announced that I was going to be the Marcom director there, and it was people were just like, "Oh, Eddie, you were going to the right place, and it fits you like a glove." Before we get to that, I want to step back to your introduction to the presidency. So your first presidency was Philander Smith College, now Philander Smith University. What's something that you wish you had gotten a heads up about being a president before you stepped into your first presidency?
For Philander in particular, I would have liked to have known how bad it really was. I sort of knew. I started December 13th. And that Friday, I flew back to Albany so we could pack up, do Christmas, pack up, then move to Little Rock. But I met with the board chair that Friday before I got on the plane. And I was like, man, y'all didn't tell me what was going on here. And he laughed. He said, yeah, if we told you, you probably wouldn't have come. I was like, yeah, because
Hmm.
it was crazy. It was in the first week. It was you had people jumping ship. The CFO took a job at Graham. He said, nothing personal against you. He said, but I know who was coming in here, so I need to find a job. The VP for Academic Affairs left. The VP for Institute Advancement was leaving right behind that. So I'm dealing with skeletal crew, and I'm just finding all kind of stuff that nobody knew about. And so, I always tell new presidents, I was like, don't come in somewhere new talking about my vision is X, Y, and Z because you're going to look crazy. You have no idea what you don't even know. It's going to take 12 to 18 months. We were finding stuff in drawers, like bills that had been sitting in drawers. That's the kind of stuff we were finding. So it's like you got outstanding bills and people upset with you and you don't even know why. And I didn't make any grand pronouncements because I had done some work before. The previous president gave me a box of some stuff. And so going through some of that, I realized like, this stuff don't add up. So that's why I sort of knew someone right. And then after my first week, I was like, oh, this
Hmm.
place is a mess. But that would be the thing. Just always be very careful starting, not to come in saying what you're gonna do because you don't know. And that's the best thing. You need to come in knowing that you don't know. You don't have a clue.
So I want to jump back to dealing with the work culture and having to work with people to be more confident in the future. Because I have to imagine that your first presidency, knowing that you had a lot of stuff to deal with going in, I can only imagine that you had to deal also with a lot of folks who were probably scared, nervous, confused, not really know. I mean, is that an accurate depiction of some of what you saw, or just general? We're just gonna go along until somebody helps us figure this out. I mean, what was the culture there, the work culture?
The culture was one of being in denial, that people didn't fully appreciate what was going on. Now they had been sold, which is, I mean, me and the previous president butted heads because she wanted everybody to believe everything was great. We had these new buildings on campus and this and this, and I was like, yeah, it's not an accurate reflection of where we are.
Considering those kinds of issues, that's not bad.
Yeah, yeah, now we had to do a 20% increase in our tuition and fees, which the students they absorb, but it was like, man, y'all charging like the community college here, which is why people think you're a community college, but you're a private institution. You can't run the business on this. It's not enough money. So we did all of that, but I'm explaining to people what's going on, and people were upset. And we had just started the lecture series, so somebody was like indignant, like, "Were you gonna cut the lecture series too?" I said, "Yeah, I might have to," and I really didn't want to because that was one of the bright spots for us that was bringing us some positive attention. So I was just getting ready to riot act. And I was like, oh, so this is like that morning for Faculty Staff Institute. So during lunch, I was just sitting in my office, just dejected, like, golly, these folk, man, And so my assistant, she came in there and fussed at me. She's an AKA. And she said, you better not let them people talk to you like that. You better go and tell these people what the real deal is. And so when we started the second half of the day, I brought out Southwest Atlanta, Walter. And I said, when all this stuff was happening, my address was 2117 Savannah Lane, Albany, Georgia. But yet there are some people sitting in this room right now when all this was happening, and you ain't do nothing to prevent it. And that ended it then. It was like, look, I wasn't here when it started, but we're gonna fix it. And then it was so you had to sort of put the pimp hand down then and be like, look, I didn't do this. Y'all did this, but I'm gonna fix it. And that was it. No more problems in. I mean, Eddie, I like showed them the documents on the PowerPoint. I went step by step. This on this date. So I'm clearly not there when all this stuff was happening. And people mad at me. I was like, I wasn't here. I just showed y'all everything. I gave them the academic version. They didn't understand that. But when I said, look, I wasn't here, but some of y'all was, okay, they let it go.
Ah, that's interesting that for them there had to be a wake up call because the work culture was sleeping. It sounds like they were sleepwalking basically. You're listening to I Want to Work There. I'm Eddie Francis, and we're talking to Dr. Walter Kimbrough, and he is a president in residence with the Rutgers University Center on MSIs. Hey, it's Eddie Francis, and I want to personally invite you to the industry's hottest event this summer, the Engage Summit, hosted in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th. The Engage Summit is your roadmap for AI readiness in higher education. Sessions will focus on cutting edge AI applications that are reshaping student outreach, enhancing staff productivity, and offering deep insights into ROI. It's a dynamic blend of theory and practice, and it isn't your typical conference. Think of it as a 2-day masterclass where marketers and enrollment managers come together to learn how to respond to radical changes in AI and its transformative potential. Forget yawning through sessions or clearing out your inbox. We know you do it. This event will provide inspirational programming, truly tactical takeaways, and best-in-class networking opportunities. Oh, and the best part, the Engage Summit is incredibly affordable. Use the discount code Enrollify50 and you can register for just $99. So, join your favorite Enrollify network creators at the Engage Summit this June. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there. When did you realize that your presence as a president influenced the experiences of the faculty and staff? Well, I mean, it sounds like for your first presidency, it came right out because you had to be a very strong voice to establish that culture. So would you say that's when you figured it out, when you had your sister walk in and let you know how you had to handle that situation?
I had ideas as to how I wanted to approach the presidency. I didn't know I was going to have some of the challenges, but particularly small HBCUs that are church related have they need somebody with some kind of pastoral feel where you got to get to know people, those kinds of things. That's very important as a part of the culture, and that still exists. So, for example, our director of facilities at Philander was retired military. I mean, it's just like he would pop in the office in the morning, just talk, what's going on. Old school facilities person. So he was just like, if it got really cold, like I know I got to come early and check on my boilers, that kind of thing. So he died several months ago. So I'm in Little Rock and I'm speaking on program because that's the kind of, I mean, we had, once I left Philander, we still had a
Yeah.
relationship. He had called me. So it's that kind of, it's a different kind of relate. And I think sometimes people at particularly small, even at predominantly white institutions, but especially at black schools, the president just can't be this person with this title. I just don't think it works. And I think a lot of people just come in like, I'm the president, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, it ain't really like that. It's about the relationships with the people. The older receptionist in my office at Philander died about a month ago. I just couldn't get back to her funeral because her daughter contacted me and she was just like, yeah, she always talked about you. I was like, oh, Miss Camp used to send my children money for every birthday and she sent $2 bills. I mean, that's how old school she was. So I was like, no, we saw that card from Miss Camp and it's like them $2 bills in there from Miss Camp. So, like I said, but you have to have a relationship with people to do that. And I think there are too many people who don't want to have that kind of relationship. You mentioned earlier, like getting the extra days off. I used to tell people, Miss Cat was the one that would come into my office and she'd be like, Doctor, now you know it's about to be this vacation. You need to let these people go early. So then I sent the email like Miss Cat told me to let y'all go. And it was funny. It's funny to people because they like, wait a minute, you got the facilities person who works at the president's house telling it's like exactly because I don't want her fussing at me. And so that's literally what would happen. Miss Cat would come in and be like, Doctor, we need an extra day. The facility staff you need to let our boss know. Okay, I got it. But it's because it's the relationship. And people they gotta and I think that's important like I said, it's not just the students, it's with faculty and staff. It's and you learn that when you're at schools like that, that somebody dies, you there, and it doesn't have to be somebody who works there. When Sharon Hutchinson over nursing, where her mom died, she said, "I want you to speak on the program." I was like, your mom didn't go to Dillard. I don't. She said she was always on campus with her. She said, and she felt like Dillard was her school, and you were her president too. And that was powerful for me. I was like, I got it. And I was there speaking at her funeral because it was. I just had no idea. But she like, this is my school, so that means you're my president. But that's you have to be present with people that they feel like they can be connected with you in that way. At a big school, it might not mean as much, but at smaller schools, I think they're very much relationally driven. So you have to at least make the effort. And everybody ain't gonna, fool with you like that. They're not gonna care, and that's okay. But for a lot of people, and particularly people who normally get passed over and ignored, it means a lot to them.
One of the things that we've talked a lot about on this podcast is the importance of connection and the importance of faculty and staff feeling a strong sense of connection so that they can better serve students. Can you think about times when it really made sense to you that as goes the morale of the faculty and staff, so goes the morale of the students a lot of times?
To me, it's always a balance because I'm very much
Hmm.
student focused, and I learned this at Philander. Sometimes the faculty at Philander were jealous of the students, which is funny to me. So you try to balance some of that, but particularly for faculty, you want to give them space to do what they need to do. But I think it is a balance. Like I say, at least knowing people, which is why I try to set the tone at the very beginning. Let people know anybody who wants to get half an hour with me, you come. I got a series of some open-ended questions. And like I said, at Dillard, it took me over 6 months because I met with
Hmm.
200 people one-on-one for half an hour. And so when you talk to that many people, at least you sort of come in like, you're trying to learn who they are, how long they've been there, what have they seen, but you start to develop a relationship. So like I said, somebody can hate you down the line, but at least they had a chance in the beginning to sort of put their best foot forward and at least try to have a relationship. So I think that for me is always wherever I go next, I'm gonna do the same thing. There's too much that I learned from that, and you start to
Hmm.
develop relationships. And there are gonna be some people you click with initially, some you won't ever click with, and that's fine too. But just to get the insight from them is very important. But it does show, like I said, to spend that much time because most people don't do that. They're like, oh, well, I'm gonna do a listening tour, and you might have a room full of 100 people. No, that's not. You're not investing in
Hmm.
people when you do all that. I'm showing you an investment when it's like I'm new. I got a crazy schedule, but I'm like several times a day. I'm sitting down with somebody for half an hour. That communicates something to people that like, no, you really about that life. So
I want to park on that for a second. Talking to 200 people, listening to people a half hour apiece, what was the theme that came up to you about the work culture there?
Dr. Broadway, she summed it up the best, and several people talked about this as well. They were just like, it was too many people with too many titles, big eyes and little U's, and they wanted much more. They just felt like it needed to be a little bit more democratic in terms of how the administration saw people. That was one of the strong themes to me that people felt like they were in administrative roles, they were better than other people, which is why I think for a lot of people, for me to be as close as I am with Miss Cat was something different because when nobody else talking about, like I said, Miss Cat just roll up in the office and start talking about something. But I could see her if I went home during lunch, at the house or whatever. If we needed something extra, she would do whatever. But that was one of the key people I listened to on campus because she's at a different level and she sees something different that I don't see. Or somebody like Michelle Matthew who gonna just tell you just flat out like, is she a local person? So it's like when people see that you really can engage with people that is not just people with the titles, that gives you a different kind of credibility too. So I heard that loud and clear from a lot of, and like I said, Dr. Broadway, faculty member, been there a long time, but she was seeing like, we got this discrepancy in how people are treated based on their titles. So that was, a really strong theme. And I think so other people felt like there need to be more effort placed in working with the students. But there's some people there though. I was just like, if you were faculty there prior to Katrina and you hung through and you stayed engaged, somebody like Dr. A, and I got a different level of
Hmm.
respect for somebody like that. It's just sort of like, man, you went through hell with everybody
Yeah,
else and you
yeah.
still here. So with some people there, you just got to recognize that like,
You know what's really interesting is that a lot of times you just mentioned someone who had been there for a long time and hang in through disasters and that sort of thing. This is a very interesting theme that's come up just generally socially in talking about the Biden presidency, of people saying, well, you have to know when you're too old to do the job and you have to step aside. And I find that when people get into an institution or an organization, it's interesting to see the difference between the people who say, okay, you're too old, step aside, and the ones who say, no, 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 you have a lot of institutional knowledge that we need to really, really hang on. And you are really guiding a lot of this. So, what's your experience from the presidency? What's your experience there? It sounds like you really value those people, but when you see the other side of people saying, "Yeah, yeah, they're too old. It's time for them to go," which, by the way, is ageism. That is discrimination. Let's be clear. Where do you see that sitting from the presidency?
It depends on the person. I really think. I mean, I think there are some people that, like, we had a professor at Philander who really was past his prime. They couldn't get him out of there. They put his name on this, put his name on that. And I was like, he's one of those people that feels like, and it's people who feel like this, that they stop
Yeah,
working, they're going to
yeah,
die. And when they finally convinced, because his health was bad, his health, so it's like you worried about him getting hurt on campus and passing out. So I mean, you got a different level of concern now, just for the humanity of that person. Just like, but then, people just like, oh, you're trying to push you. You might say, well, we can come up with a plan for you to work part time. Because I understood that it's like
yeah,
people like that need to work, but you don't need to be full time department chair. You can't handle that anymore. And then people get mad. I got some letters from some people like, you trying to push him out. It's like, no, we value that, but there comes a point. Then you got some people who can be there 70, 80 years old.
yeah,
They just killing it. And it's like, man, you just let them do what you just let them do. So it's dependent upon the person and not necessarily the age. I mean, heck, you have somebody young come in with a horrible work
yeah,
ethic. It's like
yeah.
they got to go. So it's not always about age, and sometimes it is. But like I said, it depends on the person, because I know there are some people who just like they really live for that work, and if they stop working, they
Yeah,
really don't know what to
and
do with themselves, and that becomes a
they've
health
sunken
issue
a
for them.
lot of their identity into where they are. So
Oh yeah, it's their
yeah,
identity. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
let's flip the script. I can only imagine what's about to happen here. So, what's something or some things that you wish employees understood about the presidency?
I'm trying to think. I think the thing that people don't always understand, and you're seeing that because of all the presidential turnover right now, is that it is in many ways an impossible job, because you have so many different constituencies with competing
Mm,
interests. And that's like, so people say, well, why can't we? I mean, you just take faculty and students. They don't understand how much of competing interests that they are. Because faculty say, we want to get a raise every year. Well, if you're a tuition dependent institution, where does that come from? It comes from students. The students are just like, tuition too high as it is. I want tuition to go down. So how do you fix that? You got one saying, I need more money, and one says, I want to give you less money. So where does the money come from? That's a part of it. You have alums who, they want to be like it was when they were there. No, I mean, times are different. It can't be like that anymore. So they'll be upset if that's, you got people in the community want the institution to do certain things. Now you got federal government probing institutions because they expect institutions. So it's people sometimes have to give presidents a little bit more grace, because on any given issue, you're going to have constituents that have diametrically
mhm,
opposed views, and you're trying to figure out, how do I navigate this? So at some point in time, somebody's always upset because you didn't do what
mhm,
they wanted you to do.
mm. And how does in turn, how did you find yourself dealing with the work culture there? I mean, because we know you're really student centered, but when you have, I can remember specifically when there were times, and I'm going to tell the audience this. One of the things about Walter that was so cool is that you took the time, like once every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, to put together an entire email, a list of people's accomplishments and thanking people for things and
Right.
that sort of thing. And I remember there was one professor who didn't think that their accomplishment was highlighted enough, and, and they and they wrote something to you about it, and everybody saw it, and I was like, oh man, I don't know if this person meant to do this. But seeing things, like that, seeing how people may respond because they have some sort of disappointment or that sort of thing, where do you see that relationship, and how do you handle that, so that other people, so that it doesn't infect the rest of the work culture?
Sometimes they say when you have an argument, it really was an argument, but it's sort of like you have to listen sort of musically. It's not necessarily what they're saying, but what else is
Mm.
going on. And in that particular instance, it wasn't really about me. It was this person is in competition with somebody else in their department, and they felt like that person was getting more shine. So it was sort of like I sort of became a casualty of a war that was going on between two faculty. I mean, that's all it was. It was like, wait a minute, it's like I put your stuff in all the time. Why is my stuff below the student stuff? It's like because when I'm curating the list, as things come in, I just add them. I don't lift them based on your title or rank. If the students thing happened before your thing, it goes before you. Well, this faculty member, their stuff is up here. It's like because they sit there as first. I mean, that was so. It was like I said, it had nothing to do with me. But this became another thing because they feared it was going to be weaponized by the other person. So in a battle, which, like I said, these are two people who always sent me stuff. And it wasn't necessarily just about, celebrating things. It was sort of like, I'm better than this other person in my department. I mean, I pushed back and I was like, look, I don't have to send, put any of your stuff out there. This is voluntary that I do. So if you're gonna get an attitude with me, I just won't put anything. Then you won't get your feelings hurt. So they backed off then. That was one of the times you just like, look, I'm about to be gangster. Like, I ain't gotta this is not a job requirement for me. This is something I think is good for people to know. Then they backed off. I was like, but I don't like I said, it was when you put the student in there, I was like, because the students thing happened before yours. So as soon as I heard about it, I just added to my list. I keep a running list so I don't have to try to go back through. So when it's the first of the month and the 15th, I just send it out.
That's really interesting though, because that goes back to when you were doing your listening sessions, and that complaint came up about folks believing more in rank than they did in culture. So,
Yep.
I have to ask about that. So, how do you deal with that? Because one of the things I always talk about the fact that being in higher ed, you're in the people business, and you have to figure out how to deal with people, and their issues and
Right.
whatever they bring to campus, and all of that good stuff. But you still have all those folks who believe firmly in hierarchy. My title is this, so I should get that. How do you deal with that competing interest of hierarchy versus a true sense of community?
So I think part of you have to model some of that behavior, how you allow people to treat you as a president, what you expect is part of it. So, people just like, oh, can we get you? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, I'll go through the line, get my own. No, so and I have to be careful with that because you don't want to insult the people who really
Yeah.
want to do those things. That's my dad would always tell me, like, don't turn out somebody else's blessing. If they want to do something for you,
Hmm.
sometimes you better let them do it. Okay, so I try to balance, but there are presidents who are
Hmm.
prima donnas, and you go on their campus and you see it. And I mean, it's like they feet can't talk. It's like coming to America when they walk, they want the little pebbles being thrown on the ground. I mean, it's that. I've never been like that. I'm just like, no, no, I'm not. I don't do that. It's like if there's certain things we need to do. We got an event, we got these extra chairs. Okay, let me move some chairs. Let me wipe off some. When you do enough of that, people realize like, oh, okay. So if somebody asks you to do it, you don't get bent out of shape because the
Hmm.
president will do it too. So I think that's just you have to model that kind of behavior. You model behavior because you know the people on the facility staff, and you can call them by name and have a conversation with them. Um, I remember one of the I think when it was Isaac when we first got here, Hurricane Isaac, and being at the president's house, they were trying to figure out how to come over after and clean up some of the broken branches and stuff. I was like, it's four of us in this house, and we all able-bodied. We gonna clean this up and put it on the. Y'all can haul it away, but we gonna do it. And then my kids were little. Benjamin was 3. It's like we gonna clean up and do it. So they were just like, oh wait, the president can't be. I was like, no, I mean, we get to live here for free. At least we could do is help clean up. You know what I'm saying? So those kind of things, people hear those kind of stories, just like, man, the president will let us do X, Y, and Z. It's like, yeah, these kids need to do some stuff. So I think it's role model, and so the expectation, like I said, I've been on campuses with other presidents, and you see how they're treated and what they expect from people. Heck, there have been presidents. I probably shouldn't say it, but I'm gonna say it anyway. When Dr. Hughes was president, it was funny. It's a funny story because she had a meeting at the alumni house, and on our campus where Rosenwald Hall is, where the president's office is, and in the alumni house. And so they would drive her around the back of the campus to the alumni house for the meeting. So when I first had a meeting over there with Adrian, who was over alumni affairs at the time, I walked from my office for my 30-minute meeting. I walked over there and met with her. So when we were about to leave, she said, "Did you drive over here?" And I looked at her like she was crazy. And I thought she probably knew I was like, so we stepped outside. I said, "My office is right there." She said, "I know." That's she told me this whole story. And I was like, that was crazy to me. We're talking about a
Yeah.
2-minute walk. It took longer to get in the car and drive around
Hmm.
than it did to walk. But just like walking on campus and doing some of that, their presence at, and I guess based on their situation, some that have to walk on campus with security. I said, I would never be a president of a place where I have to have security on my
Hmm.
own campus. That ain't happening. But those are it's little things that you do that sets the tone as well for people in terms of, particularly with dealing with the hierarchy. So I ain't never want to be accused of, the big eyes and little U's because I heard that too much. And that's like I said, growing up as a preacher's kid, you ain't really have a whole lot of that. You had to do everything that needed to be done. That's how my dad was as a minister. He didn't try to have people doing stuff for him all the time. He can get in a car, he could drive. He didn't need a driver.
I know there are a lot of aspiring presidents who always ask you about what they need to do to get into the position. If you had to give them advice about what they can do to begin fostering a productive talent experience for faculty and staff, what would you tell them?
So in the roles that they have, they can practice doing that. And I always just try to tell people that shouldn't necessarily, it could be your goal, but the real goal is to find something that you really love doing, because you don't have any guarantee that you'll ever be a president.
Mm.
So you got to find something that you love doing and you do a good job at. But then you can start learning how to develop that kind of culture. When I was a vice president of student affairs at Albany State, my team, developing that kind of culture where, I'm still in touch with some of the folks I spoke for commencement, December commencement. That would have been December 2022, and folks who were on my staff that I saw, it's just like it was like old homecoming week. You know what I'm saying? That because it's kind of relationships that you develop with the people, so you can practice those kinds of things. And we started an awards program for student affairs, and we did our own retreats and convocation for our people. Our opening sessions, those kind. You can practice that if you got a staff of 3 people. So those are just skills that you practice, and then larger staff, you keep finding new ways to engage people. But that's something that you can do no matter what your role is, and I think those are important skills to develop that we don't talk probably enough about.
I'm going to tack on one more small question. What about keeping your best faculty and staff?
So it depends. Some you want to keep, some you should though be grooming for them to go do the next best thing too. So
Mm, mm.
sometimes you have folks who really need to go, and you need to push them to be like, okay, you've done this now. It's time to do something else. So I think you have to be supportive with that. Faculty are normally a little bit more stable that you want to try to keep them. I mean, there were some times at Dillard where we had people who made offers for some really good faculty, and we countered because I was like, no, they can't have that one. Nope. Now there might be some people that's just like you hope somebody will offer them something so they could, go. So you look for those, but I was just like, no, you can't have that one. So no, we made counters a couple times, and we lost one once, and we lost to Tulane. We couldn't compete with Tulane in terms of money, but a few years later, she came back, and one of the reasons is that she felt like there was much more of family, much more of a community at Dillard. So that was to me the highest compliment because she definitely came back for less money, but she felt like the community there was much more engaging and welcoming than being at a place that paid more money. So that was a message to me, sort of like, okay, I mean, this is a white faculty member too. So it's like, wow, that says a lot. You know what I'm saying? I thought that was very powerful. So yeah, it's it depends on the circumstance. Sometimes you got people at critical moments. You got faculty who are in important programs that are you really building out. You don't let them go by any means necessary. Sometimes there are other folks. It's like, no, it's time for you to go. It's a great opportunity. You need to do it. How can I help you get that opportunity? So it's got to be a mixture, depending upon the person.
Walter Kimbrough is the president in residence at the Rutgers University Center for MSI. He's also former president of Philander Smith College, former president of Dillard University. Hey, man, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of I Want to Work There. I Want to Work There is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Mallory Wilsey, Seth Odell, Dave Kibbles, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.